So welcome to this University of Leicester PG Spotlight session on Earth and the Environment. My name is Alicia and I'm the UK Postgraduate Recruitment Officer here at the university. I'm going to be the host for today's session. My colleague Sam is also on hand as well to support in the chat function and organise any questions that you might have throughout the session. So if you could just take a moment to familiarise yourself with the Teams layout. The chat function is located in sort of the top panel of your screen. So feel free to say hello, let us know where you're joining from, a bit about maybe what you're looking for from today's session. And if you have got any questions as we're sort of going through, there'll be a chance for us to talk to you directly at the end and answer those questions. So I'm joined today by staff from archaeology and geography. And so we're going to be exploring a bit more about what master's study and beyond is like at the University of Leicester and really kind of talk about the research culture, but talk about what your day-to-day life might be like as a postgraduate student in Leicester. Just so you are aware, these sessions are also being recorded and you will be able to watch them back online shortly after the session. So please do kind of keep an eye on your emails. You will kind of get links to some of that if you do miss any parts of the session. So just to get started, I'm going to hand over to our panel, so Fernando and Rachel, who are joining us, to introduce themselves with their name, perhaps a bit about what their role is, and something interesting maybe about their work or research area. I'll leave that sort of up to you. So Fernando, am I okay to start with you?
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Fernando Espírito Santo. I'm associate professor in Earth observation at the University of Leicester, working in the Department of Geography. I'm the course director of one of the MSc in our department, the satellite data science. But I also am going to talk a little bit more for the other courses that you have too, the geographic information system and environmental filters as well. Maybe somebody now who's Rachel.
Hi, yeah, I'm Dr. Rachel Crellin. I'm an Associate Professor of Archaeology in the School of Archaeology and Ancient History. I lead our kind of marketing, recruitment and admissions across the school at all levels, and I'm going to talk specifically today about our MA programs, which are delivered via distance learning. So the main course that kind of fits with the theme of this session is our Archaeology and Heritage MA. We also have an MA in kind of classical Mediterranean too, which is a bit different from what we're talking about today, but maybe we'll get to talk a bit about it anyway.
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Rachel and Fernando. That's really good to hear, give an idea of sort of where you're based and sort of what you're up to. So just kind of first question to, I guess, kick things off. You're more than welcome to kind of, Fernando, Rachel, you can sort of jump between you if you'd like. But maybe could you tell our attendees a bit maybe about some research themes or topics or areas that perhaps master's students have sort of looked into recently?
Rachel, should I go? Well, should I talk? Yeah. So
absolutely, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have a variety of students that work in different topics in our program in satellite data science. Most of our students, after graduation, after they finish the course, they get a job in the industry. We have one student that got a very good job at Natural England, working with forest conservation. Most of the students are really excited by, about the topic of environment change, carbon monitoring, and global, change as well. So the course is really linked with the current crisis in climate that you have been seeing on TV and everywhere, because we using the data direct to tackle those problems. Yeah.
No, that's really great. Thank you, Fernando. Rachel, did you want to kind of talk a bit more about your...
Yeah, so our Archaeology and Heritage MA attracts a really kind of wide range of different students. They're very varied, but the biggest chunk within them is often people who've worked in the commercial archaeology sector already, maybe in the UK, but also very often in North America and Ireland. And they're looking to get an MA to improve their job prospects and allow them access to higher paid jobs. And they often bring the topics that they've been researching as part of their job with them into their MA. So I've got a current personal tutee who who has been doing research looking in kind of Northeast Canada about the influence of kind of colonialism on the interactions between Indigenous populations and incomers and how we can recognize that in relation to environmental change. So she carried out excavations through her work, and she's now looking to use data from those kind of excavations that she's carried out for her dissertation, for example. And that's something that we see a lot, people bringing the stuff that they do from their everyday kind of work world into their MA and allowing themselves to explore it in a different kind of a way.
That's amazing. That sounds like a nice level of sort of flexibility to bring your past experiences into your projections. Do you then see sort of people going into further study from there, Rachel, with those topics, or do they kind of maybe look to re-enter sort of the sector that maybe they were once previously working in?
So because the qualifications are distance learning, most of them actually study whilst they're still working. So they're working in the commercial archaeology sector, they're studying alongside work, so they get to keep their job and do their MA part-time. In some cases, employers contribute towards the cost of getting this MA. And then what they tend to do is to stay in the sector, but they've leveled up effectively and they're able to get that kind of higher paid job with more responsibility. But in some cases, they also then go on to explore a PhD, often via distance learning again, for these kinds of individuals that are often on our MA course. So yeah, lots of kind of opportunities to keep going and explore things in different ways.
Absolutely, thank you. No, that's really great. And then I guess that that sort of touches on one of my questions on our sheet that we've got, which is about what recent graduates go on to do next. So maybe Fernando, did you want to have a moment to sort of share what maybe students from a range of your different courses sort of go on to? I know you mentioned a couple of pathways, but again, do you see that sort of progression into PhDs?
Oh yes, I have seen. I think what is exciting about our MSc is because they really the students really get a job after that if they want it. We have maybe half of them that pursued it for the PhD, so they are really in a good position to get a PhD position later with a full scholarship, because it's high competitive to get those PhD scholarship. And so I would say that's half. And because of our MSc, there is 1 year that you can choose to be 1 year with the industry. What you in the first year you have all the backgrounds, all the courses, and all the skills that you needed, and then the next year you have the partner with the industry. Some of them already stay with somebody else that already opened the position to hold them for a year. We have cases that actually students, hold the MSc and stay a little bit longer with the partner and then do so. But yes, it varies a lot. You have the both routes to go to the academy or to stay in the industries very, very strongly.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess students, those who are able to take that year in industry option with your courses, that's probably where they're picking up a lot of their skills to then sort of maybe transfer into their next role. Or do you sometimes find that students who've done that year in industry, what then continue to work with that same company?
Yeah, I did it. So I have one student again. I have one last for the previous round. I helped him to write a recommendation letter because he was a very good student, and he got a job in Natural England, and he worked there for a while, for 1 year. But then later he decided to apply for a PhD later. So, but because he needed that experience in industry as well, it was a very good opportunity to have to see both worlds, let's say.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And then just kind of moving on to, I guess, maybe some work that you as academics are perhaps involved with. Do you sort of teach components that you then sort of are actively researching as a school? Do you find that they align quite well? So perhaps some of the research strengths of your colleagues, is that then translated into some of your modules? And maybe you could expand on a couple of those.
Yeah. So that's I or Rachel?
Yeah. If you want to take this question first, Fernando, then I can send it over to Rachel.
No, it's the research and teaching, at least in our MSc program, is really tight, to be honest. When we put together at least both program for satellite data science and the environment future, we're really targeting topics like climate change, forest fires, deforestation, So our course is really related how to use satellite image, for example, to map deforestation in Southeast Asia or Brazil. I'm from Brazil originally. Most of my project is in the Brazilian Amazon, and for some reason, the international students sometimes get attracted to explore different part of the world. You have the opportunity to do field trip as well if you wish. Go to the jungle and collect the data. It's really tied to our research. Our whole team is people that are actually leading research in those part of the world, in the tropics or in UK as well.
No, that's really great.
Yeah.
Do you find that some of those master's students are sort of contributing then to your research outputs? Do they sort of have input into publications and maybe attendance at conferences and things like that?
Yes, they do. Basically, because of our model, for example, when you have the coursework in our model, one of the coursework that we have, at least I teach one model with programming using Python language. And we target the coursework is actually to write a scientific paper.
Mm-hmm.
And when we spot some good student that really wrote a very good piece of study, we encourage them to submit it for the journal.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's translating publication. We have one MSc student that actually it is submitting the article for a journal, open journal of remote sensing.
That's fantastic. No, that's really good to hear. And then Rachel, I'll hand over that sort of topic and those areas of questions to you.
So one of the key research strengths of the School of Archaeology and Ancient History is our engagement in what we might call heritage. So that kind of communication of the past to the general public. And that is reflected in the structure of the course itself, that it's archaeology and heritage, and the key core module in there, critical approaches to the archaeological heritage. So the university is launching its brand new Heritage Hub tomorrow, which acts as a way of bringing together people interested in heritage across the Midlands. So we've been kind of working with all these different agencies for a long time, whether it's like individual heritage sites, places like Chester House Estate, or whether it's people like English Heritage or the cathedral in the city. And so the Heritage Hub is about kind of providing a way of bringing all of this together. And this ties in really well with the MA in heritage, in archaeology and heritage. And kind of in terms of how that relates to our students, we've been able to use those relationships with all these different groups that we interact with across the Midlands to provide kind of internship opportunities to go alongside studies. So to give one example, Chester House Estate, which is a kind of country estate just south of Leicester, about an hour away, and has this kind of amazing landscape that it's in, an archaeological heritage that stretches from the kind of the Mesolithic, so really early in our human history, right up to the present. They wanted to launch their social media, and our students did a pile of research about what made good social media, about kind of heritage and landscapes, and provided all kinds of materials to them, and they worked together over the course of several weeks. So you can kind of see the connection between our research that's kind of very much out there and with the public and kind of what's in this module. So the other example in there is that there's an option module called Archaeology and Education. And that module grows really directly out of Professor Sarah Scott's research. So Sarah started a third-year module for our campus-based students, where she was providing our students with kind of internships in a wide variety of different settings, from kind of schools through to working with the BBC in the local area, working with different museums, and then getting them to critically think about how we communicate the story of the earth and the past to the general public. And then we've kind of rolled that into a distance learning module. It's obviously delivered differently than what we do on campus, but it builds on all those relationships and the case studies that we have from our research as well. So the connection with the Heritage Hub, which is bringing even more people kind of into our orbit, and particularly with the work of Sarah Scott, is kind of a really key thing to bring out there.
Absolutely. No, that sounds like such good ties to to what we say is our great output at Leicester, and it's lovely to see that that's tying in with our postgraduate study. So you're really kind of getting those skills, and you're part of that fold, which is great. What I might try and do is see if Sam can pull out some information to pop in the chat about the Heritage Hub, so that if people are watching, they'll be able to find out some more details on there. That sounds really good. And I guess you've both sort of alluded to kind of things like internships and field trips and things like that as well, which I think is such a key thing that when you're coming to do your postgraduate study, you can be a part of and become involved in. You develop such great skills from that. When I was doing my postgraduate studies, I've very much found a great benefit from being immersed in that environment and in that culture. So I just wanted to sort of change tack a little bit, and maybe sort of think about how people from different walks of life, different maybe undergraduate study points, may then sort of come into your courses for their master's study. Do you find that typically you have students who, especially maybe for Rachel, do you find that you have students who perhaps studied history or English or other sorts of similar geology throughout experiences and then look to do your degree? How does that sort of pathway look for different students on your programme?
So we have a lot of students who have archaeology, or in the North American case, anthropology degrees that come in, but then we also have students from quite varied backgrounds. And in those cases, we often offer what we call a bridging module. So if your background is in a different subject and you're wanting to get into archaeology, we usually kind of have a conversation with you, and we look at your CV and what you've done before, and we think about which of our distance learning modules that are available to undergraduate students might help bridge you into the subject effectively. Sometimes we use that in cases where people might have worked in the sector but not have a formal qualification, or they might have they might have qualifications in a different subject. So I can think about cases where we've had people who've kind of worked in more military history type stuff, and we've given them a bridging module as a way in, where we've got people who have kind of worked in, I can think of a case of a kind of a photographer who was doing photography, did some photography for some archaeologists and decided that was the direction they wanted to take. So we picked some modules, and that kind of undergraduate level module is picked to help the student bridge the gap into changing subject effectively, giving them that background and that kind of stuff to help support them. You take that module, it runs over the course of kind of 3 or 4 months. You have to complete the assessment, and we usually want a particular score in that assessment to make us happy that it's the right kind of transition for you to make. But it's kind of, if the module doesn't go well and you decide you don't like it, it also gives you an out at that point. You've not signed up for a whole MA. You can kind of do that bridging module, see how it goes, see whether you like the distance learning style, and kind of make your decision at the end of that, if that makes sense.
That's really useful. I think that's really helpful. Something I'm often asked is about people who are wanting to perhaps change careers or change directions for their knowledge. They might have some really strong background knowledge in another area. They want to bring that into a new area, but how do they kind of balance that? And I think that's really, really helpful. And then Fernando, I was kind of wondering maybe from your side of things with your your GIS course. Do you again have people from sort of slightly different backgrounds who may not have studied geography in a traditional sense and might have come at this from a more computer-based?
Yeah. I'm going to respond a little bit more for the satellite data science.
Yeah, of course.
I'm the director of this MSc. Yes, in our MSc, we have people with different backgrounds. The entire master is designed accepting that you do not have a background in remote sensing or image processing or any computer language. So we start from the zero in that regards, and we build up your knowledge in the first semester, the first and second semester. So when the students are ready to write the MSc dissertation, I think they're ready because they did all the course, all the training before. And it is nice. We have people with a background in geography, ecology, or even computer science, but they mix it up and bring it up different skills in our course. I can tell you that people with a background in computer science, they have some a little bit advanced because they know the language and programming. and the people with geography struggle a little bit to learn a new language, a new computer language. But sometimes with the practical life, when you talk about, forest fires or deforestation, the people with a background in computer science doesn't know anything about those events. So there is a mixing of experience in the class, which is good,
Yeah, absolutely.
We
Yeah,
start
definitely.
warming up.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe we can talk a bit more about kind of what postgraduate culture is like and how that might vary from undergraduate culture. So I think, perhaps you have undergraduate students who are coming in. Lots of students will have studied very similar qualifications to be then starting their undergraduate programs. But actually, talking about those differences with postgraduate study, how do you feel like the culture is perhaps do students support one another and share that practice and work in a collaborative nature?
So yes, it is because when especially if we have a practical course works that the student have to deliver, we do all the labs together. So which means we bring it up the problem in a friendly environment, and everybody have a contribution to solve that problem. So in that regard, people with different experience provide different insights, and they do share knowledge. They finish up the course and keeping the relationship after the MSc. I have seen this.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously, Rachel, as your programs are distance learning, maybe it's worth we start a conversation on those differences, those really key differences between your undergraduate and your postgraduate learning. How do you feel that transition, and in terms of maybe the expectations, but perhaps the workload and perhaps the style of learning as well?
Yeah, so most students have done a campus-based undergraduate. That's not always the case. We also offer undergrad by distance learning as well. We have huge programs in those areas. So the kind of transition to distance learning can be a bit of a challenge. The vast majority of our students are in work. So one of my personal tutees, he's an archaeologist in Ireland. He had a Teams call with me from the site Land Rover last week, where he was hotspotting off his mobile phone to his tablet because he was in the middle of excavating something, but he needed to catch up. So the content is delivered in a way where you don't have to engage with it at a particular time. Everything is available at the time that works for you. So you get access to our online learning environment, and there's a mixture of readings and videos and all that kind of stuff for you to engage with the module content in the way that works for you at the time that works for you. And it has to be that way because we have students who are in Canada, who are in America, who are in Australia, and who are in the UK. So there is no one time that would work for all of them to be together. On top of that kind of material that's available asynchronously at the time that works for you, whoever's coordinating your module offers kind of regular catch-up sessions to talk about the work that we're doing or the assessment that we're working towards. Those are never compulsory, you don't have to attend them, but you can attend them and get to know kind of the other people on your course. On top of that, we host a kind of regular we call it a DL coffee morning, a distance learning coffee morning. That's all hosted online, and you can show up and have a chat. You could be in there with an undergraduate student or postgraduate students. They could be on a couple of our different courses and at different stages in study. But the students are so diverse that it almost doesn't matter because they're kind of all talking about the different things that they do. So I hosted one about a month ago, and I had somebody who was taking their very first module, somebody who was about to go on their first field school, and somebody who was a master's level student as well. And they're all kind of talking to each other and sharing experiences and kind of getting on like that. So the kind of you're interacting with these different people in the way that kind of you choose. If you don't want to spend loads of time talking to the people on your course, you don't have to. But if you want to, you've got the kind of means to do that. The students also have set up their own very separate and away from us online spaces that they invite each other to be a part of. We as staff and University of Leicester aren't in those spaces at all, but my understanding is that they're kind of really great spaces for getting to know other people, getting advice from them and chatting through things. In the same way that if you were on campus, you'd probably like go for a coffee with people from your course, or maybe you'd set up like a WhatsApp group. that exists for distance learning as well, and you can kind of opt into having those kind of social relations or not, depending on how busy you are and what you're up to. So that kind of gives a bit of a sense of how it operates. I think it's quite different. If people do have kind of distance learning type questions about those kind of mechanics, it might be worth popping them in the chat, and we can address any really specific ones.
Absolutely, that sounds really good, and it sounds like such a nice research culture that has, sort of is sort of coming out of our distance learning programs. It's great that you have that opportunity as and when it suits you to fit that, those interactions academically, but also those social interactions too. I think that's really, really great. Fernando, sort of similar question to you, I guess. What do you think maybe are some of the key differences between maybe some of the courses you offer at undergraduate level and postgraduate, and how do they look in terms of structure? Your talk components compared to your more kind of like research or dissertation components?
Yeah, well, what it is very distinctive to this in satellite data science and then the GIS, I can tell you for the GIS as well, it is the skills that the student have. So they're learning different computer language, which is good, but more important, they learn how to use data from the space sector. So one of the key elements in our MSc, and I forgot to tell you this before, it is really tied with the space park Leicester. We have a different on different campus outside of Leicester. It's a huge investment from the UK government in terms of space and space exploration, space monitoring on the Earth. So the students have very this connection with our center outside of Leicester as well. But more important, they leave the course with very good skills in terms of computer language, writing, and analyze the problem in different ways. So I think they're really prepared for the world after the MSc. I think that's they make it very different, our MSc program.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rachel, feel free to kind of come back in on this question. I know that you mentioned, you're a personal tutor and you have that level of support as well as all the other pieces of support you mentioned. So I was going to put sort of a similar question to Fernando in terms of support from your side. Did you want to maybe talk about personal tutees or perhaps any sort of supervising and that academic support whilst you're on your postgraduate course? And again, Rachel, feel free to come in after Fernando's spoken if you wanted to add anything.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. So the first thing that happened here is with the MSc, we give the support for the students of one-to-one. So you're going to have your personal tutor in your department, and you're going to get another academic as well following you up during your dissertation. So you have two researchers looking to you and give you advice, which this make it very different because the ratio between the supervision and professor here is quite good in Leicester. So you feel that support. You feel support personally, how you're going to develop your model during the course, but you also feel relaxed, because you're still learning how to do research. So then you have another academic helping you to design your dissertation during the entire MSc. So I have students talk on different problems, for example, climate change in Africa or in Brazil, and they want to work in that topic using remote sensing. And they stay with me in a journey for at least 1 year. And so I give support for them to finish the dissertation. It's quite good.
Yeah, no, that's great, and it's good to see the different types of touch points that you have in that academic and also more pastoral support as well. Rachel, did you want to add anything onto there? And
yeah, the story is pretty similar. You get a personal tutor who is kind of going to follow you through the whole journey, and then a tutor for each module that you take. There's somebody in charge of that who you can get hold of and who will kind of run the course for you. And then a dissertation supervisor. Sometimes with our MA level ones, it might be necessary to pull in 2 people for the supervision of the course. So particularly because of the way we often accommodate the kind of specialisms and work worlds of people who are already working in the sector, sometimes we can't provide the absolutely ideal person to supervise the dissertation. But what we can do is we can patchwork 2 of our staff together and kind of use them alongside the students' expertise. So I can think about I marked a dissertation recently for a master's student that was about these kind of huge shell middens in Florida, built by early people, some of the earliest people in the Florida region. And we don't have anybody that specifically does that, but they'd had kind of two supervisors, one who works on kind of indigenous peoples in the Americas and one who works on landscape alteration. And they'd kind of worked together with this student because the student works in this area for their job and had all this data that they'd kind of been involved in these excavations, and they wanted to really explore the topic in the kind of detail they weren't able to do in their day-to-day work life. So kind of bringing all of that together and giving them to people made it much more possible to kind of allow them to explore that thing that really mattered to them in the best possible way. So yeah, the staff that are relevant for the bit that you're doing, we'll hook you up with them and kind of help create that relationship for you.
No, that's really great, and it just lends itself to kind of taking the knowledge that we've got at Leicester and helping you kind of support you on your study journey and the directions that you want to sort of take things in. So just to again point out to people who are kind of in attendance today, if you wanted to pop any questions on the chat, please feel free to do so. We are sort of drawing towards the end of the session, but I have a couple of kind of more final questions that are perhaps a bit more open for discussion in terms of things that continue to amaze you or inspire you in your expertise, or maybe the thing that first got you hooked originally in your area that you felt was a really pivotal moment for you. This is really just a chance for our attendees to learn a bit more about you and your life at maybe the University of Leicester. So I don't know if Fernando or Rachel, you wanted to take that one first. I know that's probably a bit of a big question.
Yeah. So personally, I like a lot technology. So that's what makes satellite data science very attractive for me. It's somehow is a revolution what's happening in our field. We have so many missions of satellites that every day I learning about the different missions, different satellite is going to be launched, more and more data it is in space. So I have this side of me that really like the technology. The satellite data science course is really for that. But I have another side that's I'm a tropical forest ecologist by training as well. So I do like to go to the field. I have been spent 1 year in Amazon by myself alone, collecting data, and I'm really crazy by biodiversity and carbon and all those conversations, and tied together because we need the remote sensing to monitoring deforestation, forest fire, climate change in the tropics. And we get students with this background as well, students that are really interested in biodiversity and want to use remote sensing to quantify biodiversity through the space, which is amazing. We never could think about this a couple of years ago. So I live in this both world between technology, but also going to the jungle, spending a couple of months there, doing forest inventory, do species identification, go back to the ideas of Darwin and all this kind of stuff as well.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I really enjoy listening to the answers to these questions, and it's something that lots of opportunities I feel like I want to ask people who are working at the university, because they always have such amazing answers to bring to the table. And I just think it could very well be that we have somebody who watches this session back and they really resonate with the things that capture your interest and attention. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Rachel, I'll hand over to you.
So I guess the kind of the thing that I kind of like best about archaeology is the way that it allows you to engage with kind of radically other worlds, if you like. So when you're kind of studying, my research mostly focuses on the Neolithic and the Bronze Age, so kind of 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Communities living at those kinds of times have completely different understandings of how the world works. In the kind of Neolithic period, it's not clear that gender mattered at all, really, in the way that it does today. They don't seem to have elaborated at all on differences between biological men and women, for example. But they might well have treated animals as equal, or particular kinds of animals as equals to them, and seen them as part of their family, as their kinship structures. And that kind of radical otherness of the past, I guess, is the thing that really kind of draws my attention into it. And I've been working on a book project that's kind of coming to the end at the minute, that's about how we can use those kind of archaeological ways of thinking to try and help with problems that the world has in the present day. So thinking about how thinking like an archaeologist can allow you to approach differently issues like climate crisis, or issues like homelessness or leadership or power, for example. I'm really interested in that kind of the real radical otherness of the past and how it allows us to think differently about the present. And for me, that's kind of one of those key things that heritage is really about. It's about showing people both that there are similarities between the past and the present and that they can connect with it, but also that there are really at times jarring differences and what that teaches us and what we can learn from that. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you as well for sharing. That's really, really cool. I just absolutely love asking that question and just really hearing about, what that hook is for you and what that, what research looks like for you and what your passions are. I love that question. I think it's amazing to hear. So thank you. We have had a couple of questions through actually on the chat. So I think what we'll do is we'll touch upon those before we kind of bring the session to a close. So some of these might be revisiting a couple of topics we may have already discussed. What do you do if the thing you want to study and go on to a PhD doesn't seem to actually exist? Is an MRes the best way to go? So I guess this is quite a broad question that's kind of come in. Do you have maybe any advice, Rachel or Fernando, on this? I'm obviously not aware which kind of school we're looking at here, but do you have any sort of advice from maybe students that you've supervised, or perhaps any sort of personal experiences from this?
So maybe Rachel, I'm still digesting the question, still here in the chat.
No, that's okay. So we offer an MRes, which allows the student to really shape their own project and to kind of take themselves in their own direction. And often that MRes is effectively a year's prep for the beginning of a PhD. We've got a current student who's doing an MRes, not actually necessarily because she wants to do a PhD, but because she lives in Leicester and she wanted to stay in Leicester for family reasons. And so this kind of works out as a way for her to get an MA. She's designed a project that's kind of built out of her undergrad and is all about kind of medieval castles and things like that. In other cases, the MRes allows you to kind of to do what the question is asking, to build your own thing. In the world of archaeology, I would say that a kind of a more general MA is not necessarily going to hold you back. So it doesn't matter if it doesn't precisely align with what you want to go on to do your PhD with. And there are always ways to kind of pick up those extra skills. But I wonder whether Jazz might be somebody thinking a bit more about, I want to do a PhD with really specific sciencey sets of skills that they don't have. And Fernando might be the one that they're asking, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Any advice, maybe, Fernando? I guess it's also a general question about, how do you take that direction beyond your undergraduate? I know that within some fields, some students perhaps go through from a bachelor's degree and you can transfer into a PhD very easily. But I think it depends on some of the things Rachel's touched upon about that flexibility, what works for you. Can you tie in some of those? And actually, they don't always have to directly flow into one another. But maybe, Fernando, you also have some advice.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, one thing that is really good, MSCs, you're not going to be only tied with your supervisor, your MSc supervisor. So you have the entire team around of you. So one thing that we encourage a lot is to students come for the department, encourage them to see talks, and we have the career advisor at the university helping all the MSc students. So you're not really alone in that journey. That's the main thing. You're going to find a way. I think the gate, it is really starting with the program with us, and we somehow going to support you whatever direction you wanted, or in academy or even in the industry as well.
Definitely, and I think the question that we had come through, I think just again lends that wider point of just getting in touch actually with the contacts that are listed on the university's website. Often, sometimes that conversation can help break down some of those maybe misconceptions or preconceptions that you have about what that course may be structured like, and so actually opening those doors, it might be a great way to start thinking about your next steps and direction. We did have another question come through as well. I think this is for you, Fernando, about after an MPhil in nanoscience and technology degree with research work, can we also apply to the environmental science? So I'm guessing maybe the environmental futures course is what maybe they're trying to look into. Is this program research based only along with coursework? So this is probably touching on our environmental futures course, Fernando, if you're able to take that.
I think it's talk a little bit about environment futures. Yeah, definitely. Doesn't matter if you have a different degree before. The environment future is really open, and it's really open because environment future it was designed basically to tackle those discussion about net zero. There's discussion nowadays about climate change. So in those discussions, you need to have background in different fields. So no, it doesn't matter. You're going to start from the bottom, really from the start zero. We do not expect that you have kind of some background on that, but sure, you're going to feel a little bit more comfortable if it is a little bit more alienated with the MSc. But I think the entire program is going to give you some direction.
That's great. Thank you both for answering those questions. So we have kind of got one final, I guess, question or sort of statement for you to give. I'll give you a minute or so to have a think about it, and I need to pop some information on the screen for our viewers as well. But I'll just ask you to sort of sum up master's study or life at the University of Leicester in either 1 to 2 words or a couple of sentences is absolutely fine as well. So I'll give you a moment to have a think about that. But what I'll do in the meantime is just share a slide just to let our viewers watching know. Let's make this full screen. Perfect. So just so you know, to those of you who are watching, we will have some more of these PG Spotlight sessions taking place across the remainder of the week. You can find out more about other subjects as well at the University of Leicester, and the recordings will be out on YouTube, so you can catch up on any that maybe you've missed, or if you wanted to rewatch them. Just to point out as well that applications for our PGT courses are open, and we would really recommend if you are looking to apply for 2023 September entry, please sort of look into applying sooner rather than later and take note of when the deadlines are. Each course page will have a section with key dates in there, including deadlines and closing dates for your application to go through. So please use all of the tools on our website to kind of reach out to us if you require some support, particularly from admissions as well. You can also find out the entry requirements, information on funding, scholarship options on our course pages as well. So if you do follow the website at the bottom, I'll also get Sam to post that in the chat too. You will be able to find out lots of information there as well. We hosted a recent series on funding for international students, UK students, and more information about applying for visas and some pre-sessional English courses. So do head to our postgraduate pages if you're looking for more information on postgraduate study more generally. So if you follow the QR code on the screen, you'll be able to get to our main postgraduate page as well. And there you'll find that search for a course function. It's worth saying that below that, we have our chat to our students and staff button there as well. So you can send a message to one of our ambassadors or a member of staff, including admissions, to ask us any questions that you've got whilst you're in that application writing process. So please do get in touch with us if you have any queries. So I'm going to hand back over. So Fernando and Rachel, if you could sum up or some final remarks on sort of postgraduate study at the University of Leicester and maybe a bit about why you would encourage people to apply for your subjects. So Fernando, did you want to take this first?
Yeah, well, if I will summarize why you should go to Leicester, is one word, is excitement. It's really excited. Our MSc is based on excitement. You're going to feel that if you take our course. You're going to feel in different dimension because our MSc really open many opportunities for the students after.
That's great. That's a great word. Thank you. And then Rachel, I'll hand over to you.
So because our courses are distance learning, they're really about doing a master's your way, in the way that suits you, at a time in your life that suits you, and potentially alongside your other commitments, whether they're work or caring, or that you're just like fascinated by the subject and want to do an MA in your retirement. That happens a lot. So it's about a course that's going to suit you and learning in a way that's going to suit you as well. That's kind of the big sell for our courses.
Amazing, thank you. So the last thing to do is just to thank Rachel and Fernando for joining me today. That was really great, and just so lovely to hear about your courses, and just see your passion come through as well about your subjects. It's really lovely to see that, and I think that's something that we'll be replicating across all of our PG spotlights. It is that. So thank you so much for joining us today, and please do follow the links that Sam has shared in our chat, and do keep in touch with us as well throughout your application process. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Ok, tchau, tchau.